A short article from Richard Dawkins. The version that I've given you makes four points, and we want to employ some of the techniques that we've learned over the past 3 weeks to kind of analyze what he's saying and what his argument is, and how his sub-arguments may support the larger one. So, we're just going to get started and wade in and see how things go. So his overall conclusion is this: a creator God almost certainly does not exist. Okay, so if you read through the entire argument, this is his overall conclusion. Now the first part is this, and it's long, and I'm going to read it because I'm up front. He says, as a Darwinian, something strikes me when I look at religion. Religion shows a pattern of heredity, which I think is similar to genetic heredity. The vast majority of people have an allegiance to one particular religion. There are hundreds of different religious sects, and every religious person is loyal to just one of these. Out of all the sects in the world, we notice an uncanny coincidence. The overwhelming majority just happen to choose the one their parents belong to. Not the sect that has the best evidence in its favor, the best miracles, the best moral code, the best cathedral, the best stained glass, the best music. When it comes to choosing from the smorgasbord of available religions, their potential virtues seem to count for nothing compared to the matter of heredity. He's obviously a skeptic. Yeah. This is an unmistakable fact. No one could seriously deny it. Yet, people with full knowledge of the arbitrary nature of this heredity somehow manage to go on believing in their religion, often with such fanaticism that they are prepared to murder people who follow a different one. Truths about the cosmos are true all around the universe. They don't differ in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Poland, or Norway, yet we are apparently prepared to accept that the religion we adopt is a matter of an accident of geography. If you ask people why they are convinced of the truth of their religion, they don't appeal to heredity. Put like that, it sounds too obviously stupid. Nor do they appeal to evidence. There isn't any. And nowadays, the better educated admit it. Nope, they appeal to faith. Faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. The worst thing that the rest of us are supposed to, the worst of it is, the rest of us are supposed to respect it, to treat it with kid gloves. Okay, well, pretty harsh critique. I kind of summarized each of the 4 sections for you on the handout. And here are the summaries that I gave you. So the summary of this first part, which is what I just read as an opening. People embrace a religion because of social and not rational factors. Okay, you agree that that's a pretty good summary of that? People embrace a religion because of social, where they grew up, what their parents did, rather than choosing on the basis of some rational. Well, what do you think of that? What he's doing is critiquing religious people for the reasons that they're holding their view. They're saying you're not choosing a view because of a good reason, it's a bad reason, just because you grew up there. That is called the genetic fallacy. So it's just like saying you just believe in God because you need a father figure. Well, telling me the reasons that I hold a view don't address the value of the view itself. As C.S. Lewis said, first you must show that a man is mistaken before you can explain why he's mistaken. Okay, so this is the classic genetic fallacy. Dawkins, in this paragraph, is not addressing the merits of whether it makes sense to believe in God or not, whether there's evidence for it. As you pointed out, he's not addressing the evidence here. He's addressing the reasons people hold the view. Okay? So it doesn't support his argument. It may be interesting, but it doesn't contribute to his argument. Okay, so that's what we're looking at now. How does his how does he support his argument? Because an argument is a conclusion based on reasons. Okay, let's look at the next one. Yes?
And also, it's incredibly inflammatory and say that basically such fanaticism as behavior of murder.
Yeah. Well, that's his purpose, isn't it? He wants to be inflammatory.
He would actually look at Islam with its terrorists and other
Well, he's also lumping all religion together as equivalent. That's another thing that he's doing. Good that you point out. Oops. Oh, this okay. This next part I'm not going to go over because it's what does he say? He starts complaining about how you can't touch religion. You know that if you have some people that hold their convictions and their beliefs, or their religious beliefs, you can't criticize them. It's off limits. Okay, well, maybe not. But this is another fallacy we haven't gone over. It's called a red herring, which is trying to change the subject. That's basically what that is. So, if you say, well, I have some good reasons to believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and then somebody says, well, I don't think Jesus ever existed. You know, I think I've seen this video over here that says that he's just dying and rising God myth. Well, that's changing the subject. Number 3 is a little more interesting. A better understanding of evolution lets us abandon the idea of a creator. Okay, here's what he says here. He says, I suspect, and this is sort of getting into the meat of what he's talking about. He says, I suspect the reason is that most people, the reason for holding a religion, nevertheless have a residue of feeling that Darwinian evolution isn't quite big enough to explain everything about life. All I can say as a biologist is that the feeling disappears progressively the more you read about and study what is known about life and evolution. Now, this is part of Dawkins' personal testimony. Okay, everyone's got a personal testimony together. So it's interesting, but it's not evidence. Okay? The great beauty of Darwin's theory of evolution is that it explains how complex, difficult to understand things could have arisen step by plausible step, from simple, easy to understand beginnings. We start out our explanation from almost infinitely simple beginnings, pure hydrogen and a huge amount of energy. Now that's a big step, to say that that's infinitely simple. The more we find out about the hydrogen atom, it's not simple, but I digress. Our scientific Darwinian explanations carry us through a series of well-understood, gradual steps to all the spectacular beauty and complexity of life. Okay, so this is his story. We don't need God, we got Darwin. So Dawkins is complaining about religious people rejecting Darwinian explanations because of their feelings. Okay? They have a residue of feeling that Darwinian evolution isn't quite big enough, and of course, that is his alternative, which he is saying is adequate. I'll quibble a little bit with his assertion that it's well understood, it's well accepted. Darwinian explanations carry us through a series of well understood gradual steps to all the spectacular beauty and everything that we see. This is starting to crumble. So I say, not so fast, Professor Dawkins. So here's an example, just one example of today. Atheist philosopher Thomas Nagel of New York University wrote a book entitled Mind and Cosmos, and here is his subtitle. I don't know if you can read it, but it says, and see if it it has a ring of familiarity to it. It says, why the materialist neo-Darwinian conception of nature is almost certainly false. He's referring back to Dawkins' thesis that the idea of God is almost certainly false. Okay. Well, he says that the materialist Darwinian explanation is almost certainly false, and he's focusing in on the mind problem. He says there's things that we know about the mind and consciousness that just cannot be explained by Darwinian processes, and we got to look for some other explanation. Now, he's an atheist. He's a materialist. He likes evolution, but he says it doesn't do the job. Now, he's just one of many that are starting to come forward that are questioning. He's upfront about it, but others are behind the scenes questioning whether Darwinian explanations are adequate, completely adequate. I mean, they tell us they solve some problems, they do some work, but they're not the complete answer, according to the Darwinists nowadays. The difficult arose out of simplicity, the easy. The hypothesis of God offers no worthwhile explanation for anything, for it simply postulates the difficult to explain and leaves it at that. We cannot prove that there is no God, but we can safely conclude that he is very, very improbable indeed.
The biggest problem was who created something from nothing. Either matter was always here or God was always here.
Right. So he would say that matter is always here.
Right?
He would say that matter has always existed.
Right.
In the face of Big Bang cosmology. What?
Which is supernatural. You can't explain that rationally.
Well, something must have always existed. Okay, something. And so if it's not a creator, then it's matter.
Right.
We've kind of hinted at the cosmological argument, problem. Well, why is there something rather than nothing? Or the fine-tuning problem. We have all these physical constants that are just exactly right. Like the force of gravity, the ratio of masses between an electron and a proton, the speed of light. All these things just happen to have the right number to allow life to exist. Why is that? It's very improbable. He says, well, okay, that's improbable, but your creator is improbable too. I think he's just offering us more of a story. He's giving us a point of view. He's not really giving us good reasons. I mean, this idea of God being improbable, okay, well, there is only one God. But you could say that I'm improbable. I mean, there's, yeah, my wife would say I'm improbable. So just because something is improbable doesn't mean that it's unreasonable. And in fact, philosophers would say just the opposite, that rather than being improbable, it seems like a creator is necessary, a necessary being, that you can't have anything without such an eternal necessary being. So there's more to be discussed here. Suffice it to say that it looks as though Professor Dawkins made a heroic attempt, but he really hasn't put together a coherent argument with good reasons to dispute the idea that a creator God exists. We're done with Dr. Dawkins' argument. I wanted you to actually read it for yourself beforehand and get a little bit intimidated. And then, after applying some of the things that we've learned in the last few weeks, I wanted you to say, oh, this isn't so bad. And this is the way a lot of these arguments are. There's a lot of bluster, there's a lot of smoke, there's a lot of fire, and I have some videos that'll demonstrate some of that. But once you actually slow down and you say, well, what is it that they're actually saying? What is their argument? How is their reasons trying to support their conclusion? Once you do that, then a lot of the force of these things goes away.